Here we go. I promised you guys the Cicero. We started this in class and we got to, where did we get to? I think actually just the first sentence here, uh, talking about Caelius's friendship with Catiline. Okay, so remember the three big C's here because it gets confusing. Caelius, Catiline, and Cicero. Oh my gosh. And then you're going to get Clodia and Clodius because it wasn't confusing enough. So I did bring this up last time. Cicero is 106 to 43 BC. The trial of Catiline was in 63 BC, and this was really Cicero's like peak. Okay, he becomes pater patriae actually after this, and that's important to remember. Pater patriae. He becomes father of the fatherland, basically. Rome, I don't know, the equivalent of the Congressional Medal of Honor or something. I don't know what it would be, but he becomes like just a massive bigwig after this, and the empire is worshiping him and everything he walks on. Of course, he gets exiled a few years later by Clodius, which is probably a reason Cicero is super pissed. But then he comes back, and when he comes back, which is right after his exile. Remember, 57 is when Cicero is exiled. Okay, and in 56 we have the trial of Caelius, right when Cicero is coming back. And of course, this will also include Clodius Pulcher. Clodius is the guy that got Cicero kicked out of Rome. And if we remember that sort of cul-de-sac picture I showed you where Clodius was the party house and Cicero was the curmudgeon, and this was just, it's like the world's worst neighbors gone bad, okay? Ends up in this truly spectacularly awful trial. But Cicero is defending Caelius, and he's defending Caelius against this supposed friendship he had with Catiline. Okay, and we remember Catiline was like Rome's number one monster. Okay, of internal Roman enemies, he is I can't even think of anyone that even comes close. All right, so there we are. Maybe Benedict Arnold. Okay, if you know your history. All right, just absolute traitor. They hated him. Okay. So we start off with, as for that familiarity of Catiline thrown at Caelius, he ought to abhorre, to toss it away a long way from that suspicion. Like he ought to be tossed away a long way from that suspicion. And Cicero is now going to justify that. So he's like, listen, my buddy Caelius had nothing to do with Catiline, and let me tell you why. Um, Actually, did I do this line with you? I may have, but I'm going to do it again. You know, okay, you guys, we are doing a lot of indirect statements. Okay, so remember, for an indirect statement, you need a couple of things. I'm going to put it back on this one. So for indirect statement, remember, you need three things. You need your ding ding verb, your ding ding verb, or your head verbs. Okay, so seeing, whoops, thinking, feeling, and in this case, knowing, all count as head verbs. All right, anything that you can do sitting down, those all count as head verbs. You need a subject accusative, and you need an infinitive. And we're going to see quite a few of these infinitive in this, all right? And it basically is ding ding verb. So I know, in English we add that. I know that the accusative is whatever the infinitive is. Okay, in these, remember the infinitive is not translated as to do something, it's translated as a regular verb. And that's where it gets a little confusing because you're like, oh, an infinitive, I'll translate it to run, to jump, to swing. No, in indirect statement, you translate it just like a regularly conjugated verb. All right, so let's look here. You know that this one, hawk, and remember we talked last time, hawk equals Catiline. Catiline. Did I not spell Catiline? I think I did. No, I didn't. Catiline. Ile, illa, illud equals Caelius. All right, you don't, and it, God bless America with the Catiline, Caelius, Cicero, Clodius. Why are they all C's? Mess. It does after a while. You're like, wait a second, which one is it? It's almost helpful to just write at the beginning, H, Catiline, I, Caelius. Just throw it up somewhere. Okay, so you know that this one, so there, Skeese, you know that this one, okay, Catiline. And notice how he frames the line there. Hoc Catilinium. This Catiline, this Catiline, okay, Uh, indeed. Enum just means indeed. I don't care. Throw it in wherever you can throw it in wherever you want. Indeed. As a young man in his youth, wherever. Petisse, there's your infinitive. Now, this is a perfect infinitive. So normally by itself it would be to have sought, but we're an indirect statement, so we would just say sought or has sought, but we wouldn't use has sought. I said sought the consulship with me. Now, remember, Rome during this time of the Republic had two consuls run. The period lasted for 1 year, but during that year they had immense power. Catiline never gets the consulship, which may be one of the reasons why he's so pissed off at the Roman Republic and why he decides to try and take over at some point. Because remember, this happens in the summer of 64. By the summer of 63, Catiline has started a revolution or tried to. All right, so that's within a year. So 1 year after being rejected from the consulship, Catiline is being put on trial for treason. Keeping these dates in line, I think, is also super helpful. All right, ad quem. Ad quem is a really cool relative clause here, okay? So remember, relative clauses start with a relative pronoun. This pronoun is accusative, so and it's going with the odd, so the accusative is telling us what it's doing in the sentence, but it's singular and masculine, and so that tells us that the quem here is going to the Catiline. And I know this ends in AM. Okay, it ends in AM, but he's still a masculine dude. So even though Catilinium ends in A, it's still masculine. And I know that we've had that before with Poeta, Agricola, Nauta. That also happens with some of the very, very old Roman names. Catiline was not from a new family. He was from an extremely important family, which makes his betrayal of the government probably even worse. All right. So, ad quem, to whom? All right. So we can just do this to whom. See if Acessit, he had approached, or if he, me, from me, had departed, or if from me, the he here is Catiline, I mean Caelius. Sorry, guys. Or from me, he had departed, ever. Okay. Now, Cicero, remember, Cicero had sponsored Caelius. So Caelius, let's say Cicero has become a big man, is a huge guy in 63. Caelius, born somewhere in the 80s. So right when Caelius was hitting his stride, let's say between 18 and 20, he would have been taken under Cicero's wing, which was a huge deal. Okay, because at the time when Caelius was really starting to get into the political climate, Cicero was hitting his absolute peak of power. So you have like sort of like this ultimate setup. All right. And it's important, guys, you've got to keep these dates in mind. And I know it's confusing. You got to write it down. Okay. So to whom, i.e., to Catiline. So if Caelius had ever gone to Catiline, or if he had ever left me, okay, quam, although multi bone adolescentes, many good young men. And remember, when we talk about good young men, in this time, we're talking about well-educated, rich Roman citizens. This is not the Joe Schmoes of the world. This is the top 1% of the Roman population who were born into the right family and had the right education and had the right funding. Okay. So you have to have all those things. You have to have money, education, and family. Otherwise, you're nobody, right? Which is a little ironic because Cicero was a new man. He was a novus homo. He was the very first man in his family to make it to the consulship. Although his family had existed for a long time with a lot of money. So I guess, if you don't have power, at least you have money. Some things don't change much. Okay. Although many good young men, okay, studierant takes a dative, had given their favor, had, oh no, never mind, it's in the perfect, gave their understood favor, like gave their support. We could say gave support, might be easier. to that ille, worthless nequam, and wicked man. Worthless and wicked man. Okay, so notice the ille homine numquam actually is indeclinable, it doesn't decline, but we know that it's wicked or worthless and it's modifying homine. Okay, so although many good young men had done this, then, okay, I don't know if it's better to type this up, use Post-its, or what. Okay, then we might consider Caelius. Nope, I lied. It's passive. Then Caelius might be considered too much familiar to have been. Let's do it that way. Let me try this again. I'm sorry, I wasn't reading the whole line, so we're just going to do this again. All right. Where did I stop? Okay, then Caelius might be considered to have been, might be considered to have been too much familiar. I mean, too much of familiar, to have had too much of familiarity with Catiline. Okay. Which in itself really is kind of a confusing sentence. So we have to say, to this one, if he had approached or if he had left me ever, although many good men, young men had done this, then we might consider Caelius to have been too close to him, is what he's saying. Okay. Because it is a very confusing line, right? Because he throws in this, although many good men did this, we would consider Caelius to have had too much familiarity with Catiline, but he didn't, so we don't. Okay, that's very, very common in Ciceronian argument. If he had done this, then we would find him guilty, but he didn't, so we don't. Okay, it's these contrary to past conditional clauses, which I'll talk about next class. Actually, I'm not going to do that right now. All right, but indeed afterwards. Okay, and here we have Cicero backtracking just a little bit because when Cicero gets exiled, Caelius does form a friendship with Catiline through Clodius Pulcher. So Cicero kind of has to address the elephant in the room a little bit. He's got to say, all right, look, maybe they were friends, but they weren't good friends. Okay. And so he kind of has to, like, you know, I don't know, put pay to that. And notice the schemeless and the witty aimless. Look at this. We know and we saw. Remember what I talked about with these judges or these court, like, almost jurors, or you will. They're of the same age and the same rank as Cicero, right? They went to the same school. They had the same experience. So when Cicero says, yeah, we saw this, we knew this, he is bringing the courtroom into his perspective. He is uniting them with him. It's a very subtle way for him to gain, like, a bias in his favor. But indeed afterwards, we know, we knew, we know, and we saw, right? Look at those ding ding verbs. Okay, so we know and we saw that this one, Hunk, was, so remember, the H is who? H is Caelius. The I is Catiline. Jeepers creepers. Okay, we saw that this one was in the friendship of that one. So, okay, so we saw that this one was in the friendship of that one. Okay. Quis negat, who denies denies, denies, denies. He really just says who's denies, but it's like, who's denying this? Okay, he says, who denies it? Quis negat. No one's denying this. He's like, all right, so they were in the friendships together. Yeah. But so now Cicero is going to be a little bit more confusing. This actually isn't too bad though. All right, but ego, you have to go all the way down here to the defendo, right? So you start up here with ego, one, and then you go down here to the defendo. But I defend that time of life, literally of age, but I defend that time of life, which itself, from its own foundation, from its own like font, there's got to be a better way to say that. Okay, is infirmum, weak, and we'd have an et in there, but there isn't one. And infestum, like we get infestation from it. I'm trying to think of a better word than infested right now, but I can't come up with a better word than infested. So it's weak and infested with the greed of others. Okay. And then he brings it back around because he started this quote clause that kind of interrupted things. I defend that this time. I defend it this, like in this place. So basically, he's pulling it all together. But I am defending that time of life. Okay. But I am defending that time of life. Okay. So that's right here. Defendo, ego. See how it pulls it together? Said ego illo tempus. I defend that time of life, which, okay, quote here, another relative clause going back to the tempus. Okay, which itself, is that how you spell itself? Okay, is from its own sua sponte, from its own sponte. Sponte means source, fountain, is there a better way to say it? This from its own source, I guess. From its own, there's got to be a better way to do that. Hold on a second. All right. From its own, I just looked it up again and they said free will, and that kind of works out well. From its own free will. Okay. Let's see. So which itself from its own free will. Oh, I already did that. Which itself is from its own free will weak. And I know there's no and in there, but you kind of want to add it. Infested. God, there's got to be a better way to say that. Infested. All right, I like actually unsafe better. Weak and unsafe. Okay. By the weaknesses of others. Okay. So what he's saying is I'm defending this time of life, okay, this youthfulness that by its own free will is influenced by other people. And this is what we would call peer pressure today. Okay. And that's what Cicero was like. Okay. You know, Caelius wasn't really friends with Catiline, but yeah, they hung out together. I'm not going to defend Caelius as much as I'm going to defend his youth, right? His youthful indiscretions, because as they say, boys will be boys and girls will be girls and teenagers are teenagers. And inevitably, at a young part in your life, you're going to make a terrible decision. And a lot of the older people in your life will go, well, I mean, yeah, that was a really dumb thing to do, but you're, 18, and sometimes 18-year-olds do dumb things. All right. And that's, I think, sort of Cicero's response here. It's like, well, I mean, Caelius was just a kid. He didn't know what he was doing. He just did something dumb. All right. So, but I defend that time of life, which itself, by its own free will, is weak and unsafe by the excesses of others. Libidine means desire, excess, weakness. Okay, you get a lot of things from this, of others. And then you have this id hoc loco again, and this is just Cicero bringing it back down again. I defend that in this place. Okay, so the id is going back up to this tempus, and he's just like it's just like reminding us, I'm defending that in this place. I defend, and you could definitely pull that in again, even though it's only said that in this place. Okay, so he's like, we're here in this courtroom, and right now I'm not necessarily defending Caelius's actions as much as I am his youth, because he was youth. He was, Fuit, he was with me, assiduous, uh, continuously, continuously, with me as a praetor. Okay, this is another Roman, with me as a praetor. This is another Roman rank, right below consul. So as Cicero was a praetor, gearing up for his consulship, Caelius was with him continuously. He did not know Catiline. Notice this alliteration, non noverat Catiline. Okay, he did not know Catiline. I think it's also interesting, Catiline, that Cicero and many others, especially like in this sort of retrograde history, are denying knowledge of Catiline. Although Catiline was himself at this time extremely popular and everybody knew him. But, you know, he became a huge traitor and like rats deserting a ship. We're like, oh, we didn't know that dude. Okay. So he non noverat. He did not know Catiline. Then that one, now it's Ille again. And you really got to keep that straight, right? Because Ille is referring back to Catiline. So then that one obtained the praetorship of Africa. Praetorship ship of Africa. All right, that was a plum position. All right, it's not quite the governor, but it's a big deal. So he gets the praetorship of Africa. Okay. And Cicero likes to pull this up too, just to prove not that everyone didn't know that Catiline was a bad dude, but he's just going to bring it up again. Then the year followed. Then the year followed. All right, secutus tum. Then annus, the year, secutus est followed. Okay, when we'd almost have a cum in here. When Catiline spoke for the cause of the money to be returned. Now, pecunius repetundus is it's a criminal. It's basically embezzlement. Basically, Catiline is being accused of embezzling tax funds. This is like politicians haven't changed in 2,000 years. So Catiline, in this position of authority, is now being accused of embezzling funds. And he is speaking causam dixit. He spoke to the cause of this, meaning he was giving his own defense. And eventually, according to history, Catiline gets off. So Catiline is not convicted of this. He's just accused of this. So, you know, make of that what you will. Then the year followed. And I think we can almost put a when. Catiline spoke, we can even say for the purpose of the money to be returned, of the money to be returned, i.e., his embezzlement. Okay. So Catiline is giving his own, what do I want to say, defense speech here. He would have spoken for himself because to be a politician in Rome was to be a lawyer. You really didn't have one without the other. You could not be a great, necessarily, you could be a great general and try politics. It didn't always work out well, but you could certainly try. There were several very famous generals who become very famous politicians later on. You guys, of course, probably remember Julius Caesar. Didn't always end well. Okay. But some of them did. So, I mean, just like today, sometimes a great general becomes a great politician. Not often, though. All right. Heek. This one, Heek, H. Caelius, was with me. Okay. He was with me. Okay. Okay. Nor advocatus. Advocatus means to advocate, and that's very similar to the exact meaning today. Nor as an advocate did this one make damn certain your dems are the same. Okay. Did this same one come to that one ever? Nor as an advocate, advocate, advocate. God, I don't know how to spell that. Um, did this same one come to that one ever? All right, so there we go. You see that? Look at how this is framed. Okay, he was with me. Notice the juxtaposition of these two people. He likes to throw the two names together to show like they're two totally opposite ends of the spectrum. All right, he was with me. Nor as an advocate did this same one come to that one ever. All right, look at the umquam, the very strong position ever. Like they were never together. Okay, not ever, ever, ever. He never helped Catiline. He was never friends with Catiline. He never stood up for Catiline, even when Catiline was doing his early shenaniganizing. Okay. Then a year was, then the year was. So now we're in this next line, the last sentence. Then was the year. Then was the year in which, quo, in which I sought the consulship. Okay. Catiline was seeking with me. Notice, I love this because Catiline doesn't get it. Remember, we talked about that earlier. You see the perfect here? I sought the consulship. He completed it. He did it. Catiline was seeking imperfect and incomplete action. It never got finished. Catiline didn't do it. Look at how Cicero contrasts the petit with the petit. It's like this petty little nitpick that he just keeps throwing out. He's like, yeah, Catiline kept trying, kept failing, kept trying, kept failing. Cicero's very good at this, okay? Nor to that one did he approach. And we bring it back full circle. If you guys see up here, remember when he said to that one, if he had ever approached or if he had ever left from me, okay? Now he comes back. Nor, never did he approach to that one or recessit, depart from me. Okay. So never, numquam, never ever did he approach to that one. Never ever did he retreat from me. Okay. Nor, never. Look at the strong position. Never, numquam. Never. Okay. Did he approach to that one? Again, illum is Catiline. Okay. And then ame numquam recessit. Never did he recessit. I guess depart. There's probably a better way to say it. Depart from me. All right. So Cicero is again highlighting this. Never. Numquam, numquam. You see the anaphora there? We have the anaphora. We have this almost anaphora here. We have the line framing. We have short staccato sentences. Like this is a lot. Mecum erat hic. Like very short. For Cicero, typical Ciceronian style is a sentence that goes on for 3 pages and has one verb. This, look at all of these short little sentences. Look at all the verbs. We know this. We saw that this one. Quis negat, who denies it? But I deny. He is almost making fun of the accusation through his brevity. He's like, who cares? Try to follow along. My client is innocent. Period. Stop. You know, so think about the word order, think about the word choice. Look at the schemus versus the widemos. We know this, we saw this, blah, blah, blah. I'm not denying that they didn't know each other. I'm denying that they were close friends, and I'm denying that Catiline and Caelius were ever in league together, because that, of course, is one of the sort of, and it's funny because Caelius in this, remember, in this trial, Caelius is not being accused of anything to do with the Catalinian conspiracy. That ship has sailed. But they are using his friendship with Catiline to like undermine him, to defame him. It's like, well, you were friends with Catiline. What can we expect from that? And Cicero's like, no, 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 no. We're not going to play that game. All right. So there's a lot here. All right. Watch this. Don't forget, you guys have a homework quiz on whenever I see you again. I don't know when I see you guys. Wednesday. Wednesday? Yes, Wednesday. We have a homework quiz on Wednesday. All right. Let me know if you have questions.